there. That was in the 70s. So even in the 70s, the mindset of a lot of people in the South was that they would still go through the whites-only door, and they would still go through the colored-only door. So if the mindset is like that in the 70s, I have so much respect and honor for those like Dr. King who confronted racism and bigotry head on early on in the 50s and 60s. Regardless of if we are black or white, we have all benefited from his work. You know, when I first came to this city, there were two people fighting on the front lines for the people in this city. State Representative Larry Turner and his wife, Johnny Turner. After his passing, she picked up the torch and the title of state representative, winning her husband's seat in the state legislature. Please welcome to the stage Johnny Turner, a Memphis civil rights icon.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, my freedom fighters, my brothers and my sisters in the struggle, because the struggle continues.
You know, Ms. Turner, you started this fight, this journey of civil rights early on in your life, and you were inspired by something that happened while sitting on...
Mama, look at all the niggers in the back. And all at once, I had this feeling that went through my body that something must be wrong with me. Why did she make a statement like that? And we'll fast forward. I was involved in the sit-in movement in the 60s, and as a result of that, I was denied employment by then Memphis City Schools, even though I graduated number 2 in my class from the Lamorne Owen College on a 4-year scholarship. I was told by the person who interviewed me that I would never be hired because I was a jailbird and would be a poor role model for the student. But even beyond that, when I was I lived in North Memphis, and I would catch the number 7 crosstown. And when I would get to Bellevue and Lamar, I'd have this funny feeling in my stomach because I knew that I'd have to move to the back of the bus. But this particular day, I decided I'm not going to move. Now, this was long before the buses were integrated. And I sat there, and at Bellevue and Lamar, the students from Central, Bruce, and Bellevue Junior High, all white schools at that time, got on the bus. And I looked out the window as if I didn't see them. And they stood around me, and my girlfriend came, and she touched me on the shoulder. And it is that defining moment. She said, Johnny, if you don't move to the back of this bus, the bus driver's going to curse you out. He's going to call you everything but a child of God. He's going to call the police. The police are all white. The juvenile court officials are white. All the bus drivers are white. And you may never make it to the jail. And I said to myself, oh my God. And as I moved slowly to the back of that bus, I will never forget the anguish I felt, the humiliation I felt, because I was being treated differently because of the color of my skin. And when we I sat in at the airport when John F. Kennedy came to speak, and we sat in the white part of the airport restaurant, and we were arrested. I was arrested for going to a Youth for Christ rally because of the color of my skin. So those experiences, when the buses were declared they were integrated, I got on that bus because, as I said earlier, I would be the last person to leave the library because I had no books at home. And as I was on a scholarship, and I knew what my priorities were. So I would, when the library would close, I would get on the number 4 Walker, which had an all-black ridership, so you could sit anywhere you wanted to, because everybody on the bus was black. But when I got to that number 9 Normal, and I transferred because we had moved into East Memphis at that time, I would sit right behind the driver. And everything, all the blacks would sit in the back because they were the maids and the cooks coming from their jobs downtown. And if they had sat up front, they knew the possibility was that they would lose their jobs. And everything was fine and dandy until all the blacks got off at their stop. Now, I could have gotten off with them, but I said to myself, it is my God-given right to sit anywhere on this bus that I want to. The law has said we can sit where we want to, and by golly, I'm going to do it. I would sit behind the driver, and when all the blacks got off, the torment would begin. I have been called everything but a child of God. I had my arm pulled so that it almost came off by a drunk because I wouldn't move to the back of that bus. And I never said a word because I knew if I said one word, I'd be one dead black girl. And there would be no witnesses other than those white men that tormented me every night. I could have taken an earlier bus, but I refused because I felt I had the same right as anybody else. The law said the buses were integrated, and I was determined. And then the bus driver was so awful to me. He would wait until I got ready to get up with my books in my hands and try to jerk and make me fall. Or he would wait until I got to the door and try to close the door on my coat. But night after night after night after night, I endured that abuse because, you see, he did not know that I could remember that dark day on that bus on the corner of Bellevue and Lamar when I had to move to the back of the bus, when I knew I had every right to be seated wherever I was. And when he was really mad, he would pass my bus stop, and I'd have to walk 3 or 4 blocks through an all-white community. But I had the resolve because I could always remember that the sacrifices that we has made in the sit-in movement. I had been denied a job, the first person in my family to get a college education. And so I had the Lord on my side. Nothing but a God could have allowed me to endure this. And it was those feelings of being a second-class citizen that I had experienced during my lifetime. And I said, enough is enough. If there's going to be a change, it's going to be made through me and others who feel as I do. And when I talk to young people and I tell them my story, they say, I wouldn't have taken it. And I tell them, you don't have to take it now because I took it for you then. And thank God things are different today because we help to make a difference. And I am so proud of the Black Lives Movement because I see them representing, making those changes that we tried to make back in the 60s. I didn't do this alone. There were other young people who felt as I did, who felt that this was unjust, who felt that this was unfair, who, when we pledged allegiance to the flag, we said, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As I thought about those words, in each situation where I was, I said, I have as much right to be at the front of this bus as anybody else. And I thought about Rosa Parks, but I didn't know that Rosa Parks had help with her. I didn't know that that was a stage. I said, if Rosa Parks can take it, I can too. And I did. And because I did, we are here today as evidence of not only the graciousness and the mighty will of, and the love and the concern of our Almighty God, because without him on my side, without the strength that I drew from him, when night after night after night after night, I took that abuse. But I could see the frustrations on their faces because no matter what they said to me, no matter what they called me, no matter what when they pulled my arm and I wouldn't move, I had God on my side. And it is that experience that has led me all of my adult life to fight for the freedoms that each of us is entitled to simply by being a child of God.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Johnny Turner, Memphis civil rights icon. Thank you for exercising your God-given right.
Then, of course, there was civil rights activist Johnny Turner sharing her thoughts and perspective on this day from the National Civil Rights Museum. We had a technical difficulty, so we apologize for that, but we got everything all taken care of. But before we of course, lost power there, we were sharing with you Zanona Clayton. She, of course, was secretary for the SCLC and Dr. King. She joined the SCLC with her husband, and her first job was to travel with Coretta Scott King all across the country when she would sing on behalf of the movement. And so in our conversation with Zanona, she talked about working with Dr. King and also driving him to the airport as he was on his way to Memphis. And she also, after he was assassinated, she spent 5 days sitting at the feet of Coretta Scott King. Anybody who reached out to Coretta Scott King had to come through Zanona Clayton. So here's some of our conversation.
I was having dinner with the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan. And the maitre d' knew my relationship with the Kings, and she came over to the table and gave me a note. Well, we were talking. I was busy talking, and she said, "Did you hear about Dr. King?" And I just folded up the note and kept talking. She thought that was odd. She came back a second time. She said, "I hate to interrupt your meal." She said, "But I just heard on the radio he'd been shot." Well, that didn't bother me either because I'd been in his presence before. When it was reported. We were in Los Angeles once, they reported that he had been shot. And we were in there getting ready for a nice, comfortable evening and a meal. Well, not just he and I, but, several of us were. Again, we had a big laugh about it, that they said, I think the guy had 8 sticks of dynamite and said, I think I got him, We saw it on TV. So I didn't think anything about it. I just talked to him earlier that day, and, so he was all right then. And I said, well, maybe I better go to the phone. I went to the telephone, and their private lines were busy. And that's unusual, all the lines to be busy. And I said to my guest, I think I'd better go over there. Because, see, when they called her, they didn't they didn't tell her he was killed. They told her he'd been shot and injured. And it wasn't until she got to the airport that she got the call and I think the mayor got the call that he is gone. she got ready to go tell the boys, and asked me to go with her. And she had a death grip on my arm, I mean, tightly, trying to tell the children. She told Dexter first, the younger boy, that, you know, your dad has been seriously hurt. She couldn't bring herself to say. She said, your dad has been hurt. Well, how bad is he hurt? She said, pretty badly, I understand. But we'll talk about it later, but, you know, he's not coming home. Now, Bernice was too little. She was only like 4, I think, and didn't understand. But Yolanda came in, and she sat on her mother's bed right beside her, and they embraced, crying, like, we're big girls. We're not going to cry. Daddy wouldn't want us to cry, so we're not going to cry, Mommy. We're going to pull this thing together. The two of us can do this. And they are wailing. The most poignant moment. That was a difficult moment for me, and I guess I was crying too, because they were just embracing tightly, saying, we're not going to cry. We're not going to.
All right, folks. So we're about to cue up another soundbite from Sonona Clayton. It was a riveting interview. I mean, it was. She told me things. She said she told me things that she had not really discussed in 50 years. Just what happened, and so she shared her story with us. She shared a story with us of being in the room, being in the bedroom, as so many dignitaries came to visit Coretta Scott King, and she shared with us Richard Nixon and Jackie Kennedy Onassis paid a visit to Coretta Scott King after Dr. King was assassinated on April 4th here in Memphis.
Before I tell you about Mrs. Kennedy, I'm going to tell you about Nixon. I ushered him in. Well, he was by himself, but he said, you know, Mrs. Nixon was coming, but he said that they got a call that one of the girls got sick and she had to rush to New York. He said, so he sat by her bed, that's where she received her gift. She said, on her bed, we had a chair, and he sat there face to face and told him he knew how Dr. King felt. He said, but this is not a political call. My wife and I were coming, and he went on to tell why she knew. He said, I have brought with me a check, a personal check, that we are feeling the grief, and because we are Americans, we have to take some responsibility for this. So as our personal expression of sympathy, we want to educate all 4 of your children. And this check that we have here will cover their expenses wherever they go. There's enough money to educate all 4 children. Nobody knows that story because I haven't told it but a few times. Then we were told that Mrs. Kennedy was coming. Roland, those 2 women didn't say one word to each other, verbal word, no word. Neither said hello. They didn't say anything. They embraced. That seemed like 20 minutes. Of course, it wasn't that long. But they embraced without a spoken word for an endless period of time. But you don't have to be smart to read their lips and their heart. The heart was saying, we know what you're feeling. You know, I know, we know. That was the most poignant moment, and it was the one time that I cried because I was feeling their language.
Again, it really was an amazing interview with her. And as I said earlier, what we're going to be doing is all these interviews that we've done, Sonona Clayton, C.T. Vivian, Andrew Young, Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr., we'll hear from here later. We're actually then going to show you the whole interview. So we'll be live streaming these interviews. And I'll be hosting these live streams over the next several weeks because we want you to hear all of their stories, not just 2 minutes here or a minute here, but really the full interview. And I'm telling you, I think a lot of you will be very much impressed by it. One of the folks who was close to Dr. King was Clarence Jones. Clarence Jones was one of Dr. King's attorneys. He was the one, of course, who was with him at his side. He was the one who trademarked, copyrighted the I Have a Dream speech. In our conversation, we talked about April 4th. We talked about Memphis, where he was. And like so many of Dr. King's associates, they said he would often talk about death. He would often joke about death. But none of them were prepared for the day when tragedy would certainly bring down the great civil rights leader, Dr. King. Here's my conversation with Clarence Jones that took place at the MLK Institute at Stanford University.
April 4th, 1968, I was in my office in Wall Street, and I was leaving early because I was preparing to go down to Memphis, Tennessee. I had already talked to Martin earlier and to Bernard Lee and Andy about the logistics, about I want to be sure that you're going to have somebody meet me at the airport so you can take me directly to the place where he was speaking, okay? So I'm rushing to go to the airport. And the phone rings, and I said, I don't answer the phone. Then something said, I don't know. I said, answer the phone. So I picked up the phone, and it's Harry Belafonte. I said, Harry, I can't talk to you. I'm rushing to the airport. I'm going down to see Martin now. He said, you got your television? I said, no. I said, rushing there. He says, Martin's been shot. I said, what? So I turned on the television. And there, that's all it is. Martin Luther King Jr.'s been shot, you know. I get on the phone. I can't reach anybody. All the lines are busy. I can't reach Billy Kyles. I can't reach anybody. Can't reach Bernard. Can't reach anybody. Can't reach anybody. Me. And I'm trying to decide what to do. And then the phone rings again. You know, I wasn't even paying to the television. The television's in another room, and I'm trying to get through on the phone. Harry Belafonte, he says, Martin's dead. And he says to me, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, what do you think I should do? He said, I don't think you should. Harry says, I don't think you should go. I said, we should get some more information. I don't think you should go. So I hang up the phone. And the very first thing that came into my mind was, they finally got him. They finally got him. Sometime our book ended. Sometime between April 4th, 1967 and April 4th, 1968, I had come to the conclusion that was not a question of whether Martin King would be assassinated. It was only when.
All right, folks, I now want to go back to the main stage. Performing right now are the young folks from the Stax Music Academy. Stax, of course, founded right here in Memphis. So let's go check out their performance.
I can't sit down.
Oh, sit on down.
I can't sit
You
down.
ought to sit down serving.
I can't sit down.
Because
I just got to heaven and I can't sit down.
whoa, sit down serving.
Can't sit down.
Sit down serving. You ought to sit down serving.
Can't sit down.
Because I just got to heaven and come on, say sit down serving.
I can't sit down.
You ought to sit down serving.
I can't sit
You
down.
ought to sit down serving.
Can't sit down.
Because I just got to heaven and one more time say sit down serving.
Can't sit down.
Sit down serving.
Can't sit down.
You ought to sit down serving.
Can't sit down.
Because I just got to heaven and I can't sit down.
Please welcome to the podium the Most Reverend Dr. Stacy Spencer.
Let's give these young people another big hand as they leave today. I stand here today with great humility, and it's an honor to be able to stand here in commemoration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I'll be 50 this year, and I was born the year that he gave his life for all of us, for America, for social justice. So to stand here today is an honor and a privilege. As I remember and reflect upon Dr. King's life, I'm reminded of his final book that he wrote, Where Do We Go From Here? And in that book, Dr. King was at the crossroads of his movement. He had young people who were angry and upset that enough progress was not being made according to their standards, and they came with the Black Power movement. And they were pushing Dr. King to embrace Black Power, and Dr. King was trying to figure out how Black Power fit with his nonviolent philosophy. And Dr. King said power and morality must go together, implementing, fulfilling, and ennobling each other. And in the quest for power, Dr. King says, I cannot bypass the concern for morality. Power at its best is the right use of strength. The words of Alfred the Great are still true. Power is never good unless he or she who has it is good. Dr. King was a good leader, and we need more leaders like Dr. King, ordinary people like you.
All right, folks, we're joined by two folks here, to my favorite folks on my right. We got comedian Kim Coles. How you doing?
I'm wonderful today. Thank you, Mr. Martin.
And, of course, we on my left, Kirk Whalen. We just heard Stax, kids from the Stax Music Academy. Kirk used to be over the Music Academy.
That's right, but we still have a Whalen there. That guy who was directing, his name is Cortland Kirk Whalen.
Yep, I had lunch with him when I preached at your brother's church for Men's Month.
Yes, sir, Reverend KT, New Olivet in the house.
First of all, why did you want to be here?
Well, this was a surprise. I'm actually performing at the Comedy Club tonight. They told me this was happening. I was like, I need to be there because I have a personal Martin story. My aunt went to Boston University with Martin Luther King Jr. before he was Martin Luther King Jr. And we have stories of him being charismatic. And in fact, I have a photo with him and my mom being all sassy saying, somebody take a picture with me because he's going to be famous one day, because she felt the energy of what he was doing and the change he was making. And so I have personal, my aunt was there when he fell in love with Coretta, all of that. So I have some family history.
You got pictures.
I got pictures, and I'm proud to be here.
All right, then. Kirk, being from Memphis, obviously Dr. King being here, he was assassinated here, will always be associated with this city.
Absolutely, and again, for a terrible reason, but, you know, as it turns out, what the devil meant for harm, God meant for good. So this is an amazing reunion. And it's also a great place for kids to learn about what happened, because apparently that wasn't important enough to be included in a lot of the school books. So here we are, and we're standing in front of the place where my dad, who was also in the movement, Reverend KT Sr., would take KT Jr. and myself to swim in the swimming pool that was where the parking lot is right now. So I have huge memories. I was 9 when he was killed. It was traumatic for me, Martin. I didn't know. You know, I didn't really know what I was going to do. I didn't know how to process something that huge, because I knew it was more than just a good man being shot down. It was a global spiritual event that happened. So, yeah,
And of course, so many people I've talked to, they forget he was here for the sanitation workers strike, where two workers were killed,
right.
Clarence Jones as well as Robert Weaver, on February 1st. And the strike, they authorized it 10 days later on February 11th.
That's right. And you know, the fact that the equipment that they used, the trucks were all, you know, beat up, and, you know, that shouldn't have happened. They weren't considered men. When they, you know, took on signs that said, I am a man, that was serious. Like that needed to be recognized, not only for what they did, how important was their work, but their actual their humanity, the fact that they were actually on the same level as everyone else. So what they did, the sanitation workers, blessed us. Their courage to take a stand, and then Martin to stand with them, has now allowed us to do what we do.
Kim, have you been to the museum before?
I have not. I have passed by. I did an event here years ago and drove past. To stand here today and face the room where he stayed and to face the space where he was slain is unbelievable. And so there's lots of marching and talking and T-shirts being sold, but I've had a private moment to stare at that room number and to know that this is where it all happened is really powerful. So,
well, I'll tell you, we were here in March, and we shot some video on the balcony. They allowed us to go out, and it was what was strange was that you have the corner, you have the corner, so you have 306, and then of course, and then he was shot right there, and he fell back right there and walked. What was very strange is I could not walk on that spot. I mean, I'm talking about literally my crew. They were shooting stuff, and I said, I need you to move. Yeah. And they were looking at me, and I said, no, you can't stand there. And it was, I mean, I literally, so, you know, around the corner, I literally, because I had to go by, I literally was all against the wall, sort of tiptoed around it, and just literally, I could not walk on that spot knowing that that's literally where he died.
It's a sacred spot, and you know the idea that what happened, you know, has redounded to not just people in Memphis or Tennessee or in the United States. What happened has now redounded to the benefit of people all over the world. And you know, Mandela, you know, Madiba also tracked very carefully what Martin was doing, what he said, what he wrote. You know, we're talking about people, leaders all over the world, and just regular folks who felt like they personalized what happened on that balcony. It was a sacred. I truly believe that he should be beatified. Martin Luther King should be beatified. It's just as simple as that.
Well, I tell you what, so later, actually 12 to 1, I will be hosting from the main stage. I'm hosting that hour. You're performing.
No, we're performing.
We're performing.
Yeah.
So Kim, here's what happened. So Kirk was doing a sound check. And so we were over here getting ready, and I was about 10 minutes from going live. And so I heard him playing song "Do You Feel Me," which was when I had my radio show on WVON. I had that as my theme song. So I've sold more copies of "Do You Feel Me" and that CD "Into My Soul" than anybody outside the Whalen family.
I wasn't aware
Do you get a
of
hookup?
that, but I happen to know that this brother, you know, with the Escots and everything, I know that he's been plugged into my music and has been a huge supporter, so it's been beautiful.
So Kirk first played at Texas A&M. My brother was a freshman, and so my brother had the cassette. Hold up, I'll tell you.
I got a Kim Cole cassette.
The cassette, floppy disk. His first one.
I love the history.
And it has a song on there named after his son, Kyle's song.
That's right. He plays with Kelly Clarkson now, by the way.
Is rich.
Check it out. Kyle is playing with Kelly Clarkson now, so it's like.
So I'm sitting here, so I meet Kirk. So we're in Houston. Years later. So I'm talking, and I'm talking to this man. He's like, yeah, all right, yeah, you're a Kirk fan. Why's his name escape me? I know.
Earl Cole.
Earl. So Earl's like, yeah, whatever. I said, oh, you gonna question my knowledge of Kirk Whalen music? Me. I said, do I need to bring out Rosalie? He's like,
he started naming songs you don't even know about.
He goes, Rosalie? I said, yeah, the song Rosalie. I said, that wasn't on any of his albums. I said, well, I can go to floppy disk, and you know that. I started breaking down. He's like, oh, yeah, you actually know. I said, don't you question my. Right. And so Kirk is the only entertainer. Anything he comes out with, I'll get without listening to it. Although all them Babyface songs, you know, he was always whining, you know, I pay your rent, buy your clothes. It took me about 6 months to buy that one. That was the only one. It took me a while because I gave away all my Babyface stuff. I couldn't deal with all them whining songs, you know. But that was the only one.
So I shouldn't do Versace on the floor. I'm thinking
but
maybe
all
not.
of his stuff I got.
Good. I love the history. I love the rich. I love that you're a part of the fabric of the city and the fabric of your life and the fabric of all of our lives.
Well, we also have some fabric because we toured together with Luther Vandross, you know,
Vandross.
back in the day.
Wow.
You know, she was cracking him up, and then Luther would come out.
I was new at stand-up at the time, and Luther picked me to be his opening act. I had a blast. I learned so much about. Listen, sleeping in the little bus, the little cubby holes in the bus with the crew. It was good life. It was a good life.
Well, again, when he was doing the sound check, I went up there and started singing "Do You Feel Me" with him. I know the words now.
Brother can sing too, you know.
You know. Career.
No,
I wouldn't go there. But
No, hold on.
we could put him in the choir. But
I sang growing up. My mom all them sang, but see, as I got older, I learned how to talk. So I tell him, I said, no, I get paid to talk.
Have all the skills, though. All the skills.
Right. See, you can tell Joe you can play. Somebody got to talk.
We're so glad that you do, Brother Martin.
Things that you say when you talk, because you lift us up, man.
I appreciate it. Kim Coles, Kirk Whalum, we appreciate it. I'll see you on stage.
All right, cool, man.
All right, then. Appreciate it, all. Thanks a lot. All right, folks, we'll take the microphone here. Kirk, just slide that way right there. Again, all kind of folks who are out here, again, for this day where we commemorate the life and legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It is a sacred day. We are in a sacred space. I mean, I can tell you, every time I come to Memphis and come by this place, something overcomes you when we do. And so it's just one of those things. It's one of those things that when you come here, people approach this place with reverence, in silence and understanding where we are. As I said, I interviewed Clarence Jones, who was MLK's attorney, and he shared more of his thoughts on Dr. King and what it meant to him.
And I remember when the question of the Memphis garbage strikers came up, I had initially didn't want him to go, not because I didn't agree with it, but because it conflicted with something else they had asked me to do. Mm-hmm. And then he's pushing back on me, and then he says, well, if I don't go there, where am I going to go to demonstrate the reality of when I talk about the least of these? He says, there's no question that the city of Memphis is treating these garbage workers like they're just on the plantation. They have no respect for them. No respect for them. All right? And it was a very powerful statement of his continuing war on poverty. So that Memphis, by an accident of history, became a very profound symbol, as you can think of those signs, I am a man, you know? Remember those profound signs? Just sign after sign just says, I am a man.
All right, folks, so I want to do this here. So we got another speaker who is coming to the stage. So I want to go to the main stage to hear our next speaker.
Social justice is something that you have worked all of your life for. The question that we have posed all week long, all year long, leading up to this is, where do we go from here?
Thank you very much. Give her a hand. I tell you where we go from here. We need to come out of our chambers and pulling our draped cords of quietism, and we need to get up off of our beds of apathy and go vote. In the last election, only 21% of us went to vote. If we would have gone out and vote, we would not have had what we have now in the White House. So everybody ought to go out and vote. You ought to register if you're not ready. The millennials, let me tell you something. Go out and vote. Don't think just because folks smile in your face and take your money that you are free. You're not free today. Racism is still prevalent. Dr. King at first was dealing with certain things in Montgomery, Alabama. But then he started dealing with the three interlocking cruelties known as racism, poverty, and violence, and sometimes he called militarism. And Dr. King's legacy was nonviolent. Nonviolent was an attempt to organize against evil, to organize against racism, to organize against poverty, and to organize against violence. And then he had enough faith to engage these things. And that's what brought him to Memphis. And I was fortunate enough to work with him in Atlanta when I was in seminary. I used to go over to his church every second Sunday because he preached over there for his father. Then when he came to Memphis, I was appointed to Mount Pisgah here in Memphis, and I had the opportunity to participate in the 1968 Civil Rights Strike. And I had destiny afforded me the opportunity to share the pulpit with him when he said, I've been to the mountaintop. However, what I remember and what left an indelible impression on me was when he said, we got some difficult days ahead. And we have had some difficult days ahead. Where do we go from here? We must work until love smiles its lovely head from behind the dark clouds of self-hatred and despair. We must work until hope yet unborn will kick through the wounds of injustice and oppression, give birth to the midwife of justice and freedom. We must work until the pimp mobiles become the Christ mobiles. We must work until the Mod Squad become the God Squad. Let us go out and work hard, and then we need to establish a Pan-African movement. All of us came from Africa. Our brothers and sisters are drinking water that's not clean over there. They're eating food that's not clean. We got to establish a connection, just as the wonderful Jews have established a connection over there in Israel. We got to do that. We can't be selfish. Let's get together and do our own thing. May God bless you. May God keep you. And let's work.
Bishop, I have one more thing. A lot of people say we have too many.
All right, folks, I found more Whalums running around here. We're just talking to Kirk Whalum, and so running to Reverend Kenneth Whalum and his son Cameron. If he had a trombone with him, y'all might recognize him. Of course, he performs in the band with Bruno Mars. Glad to see both of them. I was just here with you preaching at your church. Well, I keep telling you, I'm bootleg. So Jackie, she got papers. My wife, she ordained minister. She got papers.
Well, people join church that Sunday you preach, man.
That's true, but I'm still bootleg.
And well, no, you legged boot. You're legged boot.
What you and I have often talked about that King was in Memphis, fighting with sanitation workers. And it is as if for a lot of African Americans, time just sort of froze. I was talking to a brother the other day, and he was talking about the low percentage of African Americans getting city contracts and county contracts. But then if you look at the demographic, you go, wait a minute. All the black folks in this city and lack of those opportunities, what does that say?
It says that we were emasculated when that bullet hit Dr. King on that balcony over there. It says that when the breath left his body, our courage left our body politic in terms of the black community. But I said, most of all, I think it says that black clergy, black pastors lost our nerve collectively and became afraid, Roland, here in Memphis, Tennessee, because of the death that was so real and because of what happened to Dr. King. That's what happened. That's what it means to me.
And so many people are trying to do something. They said, let's use this 50th anniversary to put forth an agenda. Your thoughts?
Well, the saddest thing is that Dr. King set the agenda on April 3rd. It was an economic agenda, and it was an agenda that called for the black pastors, the black leadership, to work together. He said it was a beautiful sight. It was a marvelous sight to see all of these ministers of the gospel. Well, that's been the missing piece since that time. Black preachers, man, I'm telling you, as a black pastor myself, I take responsibility. But we got to come out of our denial and reclaim this legacy, man.
Well, and it's been driving me a little bit crazy. You know, I always say this. I mean, I've 3 or 4 times now, I have heard folks playing the mountaintop part of his sermon, and I'm going, it was a 43-minute sermon. Don't just keep playing that.
Well, I'm determined not to play it, and I'm sick of it. I feel like I'm going to throw up every time I hear it because it represents further denial, Roland. It represents an ignoring of that opening part of that sermon where he called for economic empowerment. He called for investment in black organizations, black institutions. Absolutely. Yes. And we have one black bank left in Memphis, Tennessee, and it's on its last leg. And black folk could keep it alive and revive it. We got to wake up. Maybe Donald Trump is the best thing that ever happened to black folk, because when we go down far enough, we'll pull together and come back up.
Cameron, you, of course, travel all around the world. And on in your travels, when you tell folks that you are from Memphis, what do they say?
Well, it's not only just a unique place musically, but the history as far as civil rights and Martin Luther King. That's one of the first things people bring up. And then where Martin Luther King got killed, so I'm glad to tell them that I'm from here, and I'm glad to tell them, that I ride past this place every day. So it's definitely like people know that happened. They don't necessarily know what's going on right now, if there's anything going on right now, but they definitely, are aware that this is a place that had some trouble then.
And one of the things that I've been tweeting about as well, you have folks who are highly critical of Bruno Mars, talking about, misappropriating music, which is the craziest thing to me, because he's of a generation who pays deference those who came before him. And when I think about music, I think about the civil rights movement. I think about the artists. I think about at the March in Washington for Jobs and Freedom, Joan Baez and others who were there. Those are not just black artists who were performing.
Right. Yeah, it's a very confusing and ignorant argument to me, because it's like, what do you want the man to do? Not ever perform a black kind of song, or he pays respects, he tells where he got the music from, and that's not enough for some people. So. Music is music, you know what I'm saying? You can't tell people what they weren't influenced by, so if we were around the same age, so we've been influenced by the same kind of stuff, you can't tell him he can't do it because he's not black, or, people gonna talk, though.
Yeah, but y'all black too.
He got a full black man, you know what I mean? Again, he's helping us pay our bills. I ain't gonna ever complain about it,
Yeah, but the thing is, y'all are also a part of that, and again, when I think back to this movement, music, in fact, again, they have now on display Ben Branch's saxophone. Dr. King asked them to play Precious Lord. Music was a huge part of this movement. When they were in jails, they would sing freedom songs. That's what kept them sane.
I think the most important thing is the amount of people that the music makes happy. At those concerts, you got thousands of people a night, and the biggest smiles and people coming together. And it's not just a cliche. They're literally it's making those people's year and life to be able to come and dance next to people that they've never met before. So it's the same kind of thing as the movement as far as bringing people together. So it's just, as long as those people keep smiling and dancing and getting their great time and enjoying their life, at least for that little moment at the concert, and whoever want to talk about the appropriation, keep talking.
Folks, talk about April 4th. What do you want folks in Memphis and America, specifically black folks? Then you can talk about everybody else. What must they be doing April 5th, tomorrow?
Tomorrow, people need to wake up from the dream. Tomorrow, people need to take definite steps to reclaim public education in Memphis, Tennessee. Roland, on the 10-year anniversary of your and I meeting, since that time, the voters of Memphis gave away their school system. There is no Memphis school system. I think we can honor Dr. King starting tomorrow by getting a referendum on the ballot to reclaim public schools in Memphis, Tennessee.
Well, again, that's the point that I keep making. The point that I keep making to folks is I want them to understand that it's not enough to stop and commemorate. It's the work. And what's also been bothering me, and I need people to understand, I've been here since Sunday. Everything is titled, Where Do We Go From Here? That was half of that book. It was where do we go from here, chaos or community. You can't ask the question, where do we go from here, if you leave off the other half, chaos or community, because he was saying, if we don't do what we're supposed to do, we will either have chaos or we'll be a unified community.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. I think I'd rather have a little chaos right now.
Well, I want chaos, but I want the community to cause them a little chaos.
I agree.
But if we are chaotic, you can forget having an agenda that actually succeeds.
You're right. Absolutely.
Gentlemen, I appreciate it.
Bless
Good
you, Roland
seeing you.
Martin.
Thanks a bunch.
Bless
Thanks a
you,
bunch,
man.
brother. I
All right.
appreciate it.
All
Thanks
right,
a
I'll
bunch.
see you.
All right. Again, folks, that's Pastor Kenneth Whalum and Cameron Whalum. We appreciate it as well. Of course, one of the performers who was in the band of singer Bruno Mars. So again, so many people who are here, folks have been coming by. I mean, it's a long program, and so you might see the folks who are assembled out here. But what you also have in there is the seats in there. Now, I want to not go to the main stage because we have one of the folks with the Invaders. That was one of the groups who was involved in that march where they had some issues or where they said some violence. And so let's go to the main stage.
Black in all parts of the city, north and south, which is where we mainly were living, came together and were not arguing or disagreeing over anything. So it was, I think, it was a beautiful time for the problems facing black people, particularly here in the city. And there wasn't a great deal of I guess, divisiveness is what I'm trying to say. And it was just great, yeah.
I guess now would be a good time to clear up any misconceptions or things that people.
All right, folks, so here's the deal. I got to go because I'm actually hosting for the main stage for the next hour, 12 to 1, so they're pulling me right now to go backstage. And so we'll be taking the main stage feed until I come back. And so y'all keep watching. I want you to be sharing this, sharing with all your followers on YouTube, on Periscope, and Facebook. Look, no other network, I don't care, you can name all of them, they do not have the level of coverage that we have, the folks that we've talked to. I want you to share that with them. And so I'm about to go to the main stage. I will see y'all from the main stage. But let's go right now back to the main stage to hear from one of the invaders. I'll be back.
So we never said that we were nonviolent. We never said we were violent. We always expected people to understand that at some point in time, the possibility of violence taking place it was very imminent. And we kept saying that. I have since learned over the years that the Memphis Police Department, the FBI, they all engaged in trying to recruit people to do various things to not destroy the image of young people, but they really were trying to destroy Dr. King's image. Dr. King was planning a massive march to Washington, and they did not want that march. They did not want that march to take place. And the reason for it is they said that they couldn't control it. It would possibly relate to a lot of violence. So during the past years, we have learned that the violence that took place that we were blamed for may have actually taken place by a different source. But since we were not saying that we were not nonviolent, it just seemed like a likely place to place it was on the place of the invaders.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Calvin Taylor, for setting the record straight and for standing up for your community.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kristen Clark.
Good afternoon. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. fought many battles, but his work to ensure access to the ballot box occupies a special place in our history. On March 25, 1965, Dr. King led thousands of nonviolent demonstrators on a 54-mile journey from Selma to the steps of the Alabama Capitol in Montgomery on a campaign for voting rights. A turning point in these efforts was Bloody Sunday, a dark day when state troopers unleashed dogs, billy clubs, and tear gas on peaceful demonstrators in a gut-wrenching display of violence that was telecast on TV screens across the globe. Shortly after Bloody Sunday, Congress passed the Voting Rights Act, which led to progress in many places, but a 2013 U.S. Supreme Court ruling gut a core provision of that law, fueling voter suppression efforts across the country. Today, efforts to restrict access to the ballot box are unrelenting and carried out, as a federal appeals court aptly described, with, quote, almost surgical precision to impede the rights of African Americans, Latinos, and other minority voters. My organization, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, remains engaged in a 4-year battle with the state of Texas over its restrictive and discriminatory voter ID law, one of the worst in the nation. We're fighting Alabama, a state that continues to elect judges at large to the state's 3 highest courts, denying African Americans a fair opportunity to elect judges of their choice. And just last week, Georgia lawmakers brazenly attempted to cut early voting opportunities in Atlanta and on Sundays, a clear attempt to impair access for African Americans in the city
and for those who traditionally vote after church on Sundays. In states such as Florida, Tennessee, and Kentucky, vast numbers of African Americans remain disenfranchised by laws that strip away the right to vote from people with felony convictions. In fact, there are more than 400,000 people right here in Tennessee who can't vote today because of laws that harken back to the Jim Crow era. People who have served their time and paid their debt to society deserve a second chance. In his speech, Give Us the Ballot, Dr. King talked about the transformative power of the vote. He saw the movement for voting rights as a way to bring lawmakers of goodwill to the table, as a way to confront white supremacy, a way to elect judges who would be fair and impartial. But sadly today, voter suppression is alive and well. As of February 2018, there are 63 restrictive bills that have been introduced or carried over from last year in 24 states that seek to make it harder for people to vote. If he were alive today, Dr. King would be incensed by the old and familiar tactics used to suppress minority voting rights. He would have been deeply offended by this administration's launch of its so-called Election Integrity Commission, an unprecedented attempt, despite its eventual failure, to lay the groundwork for promoting voter suppression across the country. He would have condemned the Justice Department and Attorney General Jeff Sessions as they work to shift course on voting rights and have done virtually nothing to fight voter suppression. But today, civil rights lawyers and activists are engaged in a spirited struggle to safeguard access to the ballot box against ongoing threats. As new movements develop across our country, whether we're talking about young people fighting gun violence, the movement for Black Lives blasting police brutality, women fighting against sexual harassment, teachers fighting for fair wages, the centrality of the right to vote remains undeniable. Just as Dr. King realized, one of the most important tools in the arsenal of social justice movements today continues to be the collective power of the vote, the collective power of our votes. One of the most important ways for us to honor Dr. King's legacy is to lift up our voices loud and clear, to fight back against efforts to purge the rolls, to fight back against restrictive voter ID laws and so-called proof of citizenship requirements, to fight back against efforts to cut early voting opportunities, and to fight back against racial gerrymandering. We honor Dr. King's legacy by fighting for a democracy in which everyone's voice is heard. We must champion greater early voting opportunities, same-day registration, and we must fight to bring an end to discriminatory and racist felony disenfranchisement laws in some states that strip away the right to vote from Americans with a felony conviction. Today, we are faced with great challenges, but we are also faced with tremendous opportunity. By working together to tear down the ugly walls of voter suppression that they attempt to erect around us, by promoting a vision of an inclusive democracy, by lifting up our voices at every level of local, state, and federal government, we have the power to strengthen our democracy. We have the power to ensure that the voices of the marginalized, the poor, the oppressed are heard. We have the power to hold our elected officials accountable. May God continue to bless our work and give us the strength to uphold Dr. King's legacy by bringing new vigor to the fight against voter suppression and to the struggle to ensure that every American can vote in our democracy today. Thank you.
Please welcome Roland Martin.
folks, how we doing? All right then, so glad to see all of you here. Glad to be here as a native of Houston, Texas. Glad to be in Memphis. Not my first time being in Memphis. All the folks from Memphis, let me hear you. Chicago people? Y'all really from Mississippi. That's where you're from. Mississippi folks? Texas? All right then. Arkansas? Okay, just checking, just checking. Again, glad to see all of you here. Folks have been talking about where do we go from here, but let me remind you, the name of Dr. King's book was Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? And so if we don't have that last half, we leave off the meaning of that. And so if we talk about where do we go from here, it's going to require us to have a sense of community. Otherwise, there will be chaos. And so although we are commemorating Dr. King's assassination, which took place on this day at 6:01 p.m., the real question is, what are you going to do tomorrow, April 5th and April 6th and April 7th? Because that's when the work actually is done. And so that's what we have to be all about. And so we're looking forward to all the different initiatives that are going on. I appreciate Kristen Clark, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights on the Law. Give her a hand, please. And the reason I'm saying that, because many of the legal battles that you have been seeing waged across the country, they are a result of what the Lawyers Committee have been doing, what Cheryl and Eiffel, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund have been doing. They have been fighting voter suppression. They have been fighting voter ID. They have been fighting when it comes to discrimination continuing in housing. And so we can talk about civil rights activists, but if you don't have civil rights lawyers fighting the battles in the courts, then you're not going to see the kind of change that's required. So give our civil rights lawyers a round of applause. And so I'm still waiting for them to bring me what I'm supposed to be doing. Now, I get paid to talk, so this ain't a problem to talk. But one thing I will say this here that I think we need folks to do, and that is, every person here should have a copy of Dr. King's book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? And the reason, bring the book to me, please. Every single one of you should, because he lays out in this book, written in 1967, really what our agenda moving forth. He talks about black fraternities and sororities. He talks about the black press. He talks about our HBCUs. And when I talk about our HBCUs, unfortunately, we have black graduates of HBCUs giving on average 5% to our university. That is not how we're going to sustain Lemoyne Owen, or how we're going to sustain Jackson State or Howard University or Spelman or Morehouse. If we are not saving our own colleges, we can't expect anybody else to save our own colleges. And the last thing is, somebody who's a senior analyst for the Tom Jordan Morning Show and on TV1, I'm a believer in the black press. Dr. King said in this book, he said the black press must remain militant and speaking up for the interests of black people. And when we talk about what is happening here, we cannot expect any other media, any network or newspaper to tell our story. If we don't support black media telling our story, then we're going to be asking somebody else to tell our history. And I have no interest when you have Robert Abbott, and when you have Alice Dunnigan, and when you have Ethel Payne, when you have all of those, we have Lerone Bennett, who we just lost, Simeon Booker, who we just lost, Chicago Defender, Tri-State Defender, when you have the Pittsburgh Courier, we need black media telling our story, because that's how we are able to change the future direction of America. And the last thing I'll dare say, if you are standing on this sacred ground right now and you are not a registered voter, then you are doing a disservice to the man who was killed on this ground. If you are a registered voter and you are not voting, what you are doing is a slap in the face to the future generation, because you cannot talk about how America can change if you are unwilling to use the power of the vote to make it change. I don't care if you are millennial, Gen X, Gen Y, baby boomer, it does not matter. If you want to change what's happening in America, from the White House to the State House to the county to the city, it is going to mean that you use the power, the black power, to vote. And if you don't vote, shut the hell up. There are school board elections, city elections, county elections, state elections, gubernatorial elections, congressional elections, and this is the moment. If you want to say you appreciate King, you send shock waves across America at the ballot box, and then when they say what happened, you say we showed up and we showed out. And I can guarantee you when that happens, they will then say, I have no idea what happened. But then when you said we chose to follow in the footsteps of our ancestors, and we chose to stand with them and do what they did, because when you vote today, you are voting for your children's children. You are changing what happens to them. By 2043, no one group will be a majority in this country, which means for the next 25 years, it's incumbent upon us to change the conditions of this nation, so when that generation arrives, they should not be fighting the same fights that we are battling right now. And if anybody stands in your way, if anybody is saying they want to go back to make America great again, well, then you have the audacity to say you can keep your little cute red hat, but I can guarantee you one thing: you will be confronted with a group of people who say no, not make America great again. We're going to make America be the nation it should have been, the nation it is on paper. Dr. King said we are here to redeem the soul of America, and you got some soulless people, some faithless people who are in office, and our job is not just to pray them out, but to vote them out. And if you say you don't have the money to make it happen, guess what? It was a whole lot of black folks who didn't have much money who were the foot soldiers. But you know what they did? They showed up. They changed bedpans, they swept floors, but they had the courage to stand up and fight. And so if you're sitting now in your cute houses, driving your cute cars, wearing your Louboutin shoes and wearing your furs, well, you better have some 21st century courage to be able to change the future of America. We can do it now, but it requires every single one of us standing up and doing our part. And so you must pledge now that you're going to be a difference maker, because if you don't, then you have wasted your time coming here today. So with that said, they told me just to give some remarks. I'm like, well, I don't have to write something. I know Gina Belafonte is coming up. Is she coming up next, or do y'all want me to keep going? Y'all say, huh? You want me to come down? Thank you very much. I'm like, okay. No, hold up. I'm hosting this hour, so don't worry about it. And so we got several other speakers coming up. Again, my man Kirk Whalum is going to be playing Do You Feel Me over here. And so I might go sing with him. I don't get paid to sing. I get paid to talk. So I'll be back on the stage in a moment. Hey, Leonard, I see Leonard. Look at you, dressed like a Sigma. You an alpha. What's up with all that blue and white? You know Dr. King was an alpha. What's wrong with you? All right, folks. I'll be back. And then we're going to have some of our speakers. And then I see my girl, Tamika Mallory, down here. I'm going to give her a good introduction. We'll be back in a moment. Keep it real. Keep it black.
Turn your attention to the main stage for Sebastian Carson.
Good afternoon, everybody. Come on now, we made way too much progress to be that solid. I said good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sebastian Carson. This is Angela Blair, and these are the guys. And today, we have something special for you. The name of this piece is called Blackest Now. And although the name of the piece is Blackest Now, we also celebrate the progress that we have made as an entire community. But we want to celebrate right now the black and brown lives that made it this far. Let's go, Angela. that we had a dream. 50 years later, we done woke up and seen ourselves for what we really are. You see, this isn't one of those, do you remember how hard the times was poem? Neither is this a I hope for the future poem. You see, the beautiful part about the past is it helps us to remember a time. The beautiful part about the future is it helps us to hope and vision for a time. The bad part about both.
So what's the bad part about both?
The bad part about both is it seems as though we spend too much dang time remembering and imagining that we forget to pay attention to the magic that's happening. So this is a happening magic poem. And not to get confused with those who have suspicions of those magicians that might practice fiction. You see, ain't nothing make-believe about black girl magic and black boy magic. The stuff so real have you wondering where they get their God from, don't it? Make you want to go back inside those books that you thought was hidden and find out what we've been reading, huh? Makes you want to go inside and listen in to our mothers and our grandmothers' prayers to find out what ancestors have they been negotiating with. The type of magic that makes you want to go inside of Walgreens and read the fine print on coconut oil just to find out what's really in this stuff that got they brown skin glowing despite all the dust that's been thrown on them. You see, the brown skin. Tell them about the brown skin, Angela. And if you know about this song, feel free to sing along with her. Something about that brown skin. For over 50 years, they've been trying to figure out what is it about that brown skin. They've been trying to put together the riddle. What is it about the brown skin?
Brown skin, you know I love your brown skin.
Sing now, sing now, sing now. You have for your brown skin. Sing. 50 years
I can
later.
tell what mine
50 years later.
Hey, hey, hey.
1, 2, 3, 4. The type of magic that got them wanting to cut off government assistance because how our black families still getting Thanksgiving off WIC? How's it that there are so many beautiful variations of black men when systemic disenfranchisement was supposed to take out most of our fathers in the 80s and 90s, and gangster culture sometimes is the only culture that media seems to highlight. So how do black men consider themselves kings? How's it that black women are taking over in entrepreneurship, politics, and corporate America when you told them no so many times, right? Told them that they was too aggressive, too loud, the hair too nappy. How's it that they still manage to rule? You see, I told you this wasn't one of those do you remember how hard the times was poem. And neither is this a I hope for the future poem. This is a you can't help but to see our magic right now poem. Black, all black and brown is now. You might want to hire us this time. Might want to bring us into those communities where you discuss what's needed in black and brown communities this time. Might want to see our humanity for what it is. You might need our love. You might love our beauty. You might realize that we are the healers. And when I said might, check this out, y'all. When I said might, it wasn't me begging for an opportunity for participation or for anyone's precious consideration. When I said might, it was actually a warning to the whole nation, a declaration. If you spiritual revelations, black and brown people's morning meditations. Listen to what I said. I said might wants to hire us this time. Might wants to bring us into those communities where you discuss what's needed in black and brown communities this time. Might wants to see our humanity for what it is. Might needs our love. Might loves our beauty. Might realizes that we are the healers. Oh, black and brown isn't yesterday. Black isn't tomorrow. Black is now. Black is now. Black is now. And if you didn't know, I understand. But 50 years later, I know we at least know now. Take us away, Angela.
Got my hand on the freedom plow. Won't take nothing from my journey now. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on.
50 years we kept our eyes on the prize. And we still have more to go. King keeping his eyes on the prize, and from us carrying the dream forward. We understand that black and brown is now. We understand that now is our time to take over and to love and to be free. Thank you guys so much. Thank you. Black is now.
Give it up for him again, please. January 2017, we saw history made when women from all across the world mobilized for the largest national gathering march at one time in history. How many folks participated in those marches? All right then, glad to see the sisters doing so. Joining us right now, the organizers of the Women's March. Put your hands together. They sent a signal to America that they are not going to stand still and watch this nation go further under. Put your hands together for the organizers of the Women's March.
Hello, my name is Bob Bland, and I'm one of the co-presidents of the Women's March. I'm so proud to be here with you today to commemorate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I stand here today with my movement sisters, Tamika Mallory, Janae Ingram, Breanne Butler, Nantasha Williams, and our honorary fifth co-chair, my son Lennon, as well as the organizers of Women's March Tennessee, where right here in Memphis, on January 21st, 2017, over 12,000 women and allies marched. The most important lesson that I've learned in the last 17 months of organizing, because in truth, I'm a new organizer and a new activist who has learned so much and still has so much to learn from resources like the National Civil Rights Museum, which I spent 2 hours in this morning. What I learned over the last 17 months is that it is essential in our organizing to center women of color in leadership, to listen to your stories, to really believe what you say, and to support you through every struggle, no matter how hard. Because there is no hope of achieving true women's equality without committing to the fight for racial justice. And so with that, I want to bring to the stage Tamika Mallory and Janae Ingram with some words.
Thank you so much, Bob. What's up, y'all? We need a little more energy out here today. How y'all doing? So I am beyond honored to stand with all of you, to be with my people here in Memphis, Tennessee. We know the history, and it feels good to be working on behalf of my people and to be standing alongside people like Bob and Breanne and others who understand the greatness of black people in this country and all over the world. Young folks yesterday, when we were at the conference, asked me, what have I learned and what about the teachings and the history of Dr. King matters so much? And I said that there have been many lessons, but what I have taken the most from Dr. King is the fact that we can make this world be whatever we want it to be. We actually have the power to do that. We can make elected officials do exactly what we want them to do. Everything that we need is right in our reach, and it can happen today, so long as we make up our minds. I've learned that we have the ability to make Dr. King's dreams come alive. And we have the ability to force America to make good on its promise of an equal and just society. All we have to do is decide. decide to follow our hearts and to lead with the power that is in our soul. Let us make up our minds that we are ready to lose a little and sacrifice a little to gain a whole lot. Let us make up our minds that we are prepared to register Lottie, Dottie, and everybody across this country to vote like they've never voted before. Let us make up our minds that we are going to vote from the school board elections in our local communities to the state house elections. That we are going to take our power to the polls. Let us make up our minds that we are prepared to stand up against police departments, and that we are prepared and ready to take down any threat in our community to our children and to our families. Now, some of us have already made up our minds, and hopefully that is why we have gathered here today, that we are prepared to stand in the face of terror, no matter whether it looks like a militarized police officer or a vigilante with a gun, that we are prepared to stand up and not bend our backs and allow anyone to stand on top of us. Let us not be afraid, and let us not only come here to commemorate and to remember, but for us to be reminded of the blood that Dr. King shed right here in this spot for you and for me. And may the blood wash up in our spirits and give us the courage to be mad as hell, to be bold, and to be united as we go forward together and backwards never, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning, fam. So I'm Janae Ingram. I'm the Secretary of Women's March, and I am honored to stand here today. We stand here today to build on the legacy of Dr. King. We stand here today fighting for progress. But as we stand here today, we must remember that progress cannot be won without political power. We cannot reach the mountaintop without accessing the voting booth. Political power gave us the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Fair Housing Act of 1968. And it's political power that will guarantee our rights now and in the future. We do not honor the life of Dr. King simply by showing up here today. We honor him by showing up on Election Day and holding elected officials accountable every day after. We honor him by eradicating ideological walls that make it harder for people to vote, in addition to physical walls that prevent people from achieving the dream. We continue his legacy by working to address economic inequalities that keep people from achieving their promise. We build on his work by fighting for quality education for all children. Today, we proclaim that we will be extremists for the extension of justice. We proclaim that we will be extremists for love. We stand here today collectively fighting against racism, sexism, xenophobia, ableism, ageism, and homophobia, and exclaiming, I am a man, I am a woman, I am a human. Help me welcome my brother, Raptivist Myson.
How y'all doing today? I sat and talked to a legend and I eagerly listened. He told me how he marched with Dr. King because he believed in his mission. He invested his money and his time to change our people's conditions. And all I could think as I heard this man speak with conviction is, I don't have the right to do nothing. Because Harry Belafonte sacrificed for people like me. So if he decided to do nothing, then where would I be? You see, if he was just content with his celebrity status, there wouldn't be a Women's March or Black Lives Matter. So I don't have the right to do nothing. Because we stand on the shoulders of our elders. We got to continue their fight against this system that failed us. Mr. B tells us he drills in our mind. We got to carry that torch. You see, this is our time. Injustice is a crime, but it's about execution. And those directly impacted must be the solution. So I don't have the right to do nothing. because revolution is a part of evolution. And our forefathers weren't given no restitution. They were given destitution and treatment that's inhumane. So if we ain't part of the solution, how the hell we go complain? So I don't have the right to do nothing. I'm on a mission. I'm screaming until they listen. Dr. King died for freedom. I'm carrying on tradition. My people want justice. I'm carrying that petition. Police is out here killing us. We're going to need some more convictions. Peaceful and passive are not the same thing. Know the difference. You are not supposed to lay down and die with no resistance, so I don't have the right to do nothing. I don't have the right not to fight for my life. It is a gift from God. So with all of my might, I will protect my freedom, my family, my home. I know y'all gonna fight with me. Y'all ain't gonna leave me alone. So when my feet get weary and I can no longer run, I think about Stephon Clark, who just died by a gun. And I say, I don't have the right to do nothing. God bless y'all.
Give it up for the Women's March, please. We want to thank the live stream partner for today, Comcast, NBC Universal. If you want to watch everything happening today, all you got to go to is go to mlk50.civilrightsmuseum.org. mlk50.civilrightsmuseum.org. So thanks to the folks at Comcast, NBC Universal for live streaming all of today's events. One of Dr. King's closest associates was Harry Belafonte, who recently turned 91 years old. And he stood with him. He was there with him. When he died, he took care of that family. He has always stood with the King family. And he has created a group called Sankofa. And want to bring up right now the daughter of Harry Belafonte, the co-director of Sankofa. Give it up, Gina Belafonte.
Good afternoon. I would like to acknowledge the ancestors and the indigenous and sacred land we are on. The ancestors have provided a roadmap for us. And let me say how grateful I am to be included on this day of remembrance, this day of recalling and reclaiming our ancestors and the legacy of Dr. King. My name is Gina Belafonte, and carrying the mantle of my family's continuing legacy is a great privilege. I want to thank my mother and my father for being so instrumental in serving as guides for me throughout my journey as an artivist. They have been at the forefront of so many movements and campaigns and have brought me along for all of them. I have carefully watched and soaked in the wisdom of so many courageous men and women that would come through my home. I have welcomed and humbly accepted the baton that has been passed to me, for that rich history is part of my DNA. Dr. King was a close friend of my father's, and his vision for the beloved community in which all people can share in the wealth of Mother Earth is a sacred concept we must adopt in our daily lives. In the beloved community, poverty, hunger, and homelessness will not be tolerated. Racism and all forms of discrimination, bigotry, and prejudice will be replaced by an all-inclusive spirit of sisterhood and brotherhood. We've all got to come together. This country is experiencing an upheaval not so dissimilar to when Dr. King announced plans for a Poor People's Campaign and called on the nation to take dramatic steps to end poverty and combat inequality. Now, over 50 years later, we are in the midst of perhaps the greatest battle for equality our country has seen since. We must ask, who are the poor and why are we poor in an age of unparalleled wealth and innovation? Indeed, as more and more people are thrust into the ranks of a global poverty class, the system is finding new ways to shed its accountability and to criminalize the poor. We spend over $80 billion a year incarcerating people and not enough on alternatives. We must redirect these resources to dismantle systemic problems and build healthy communities, creating jobs, creating truthful and healthy curriculums in our schools, creating mental health programs and substance abuse programs that assist our brothers and sisters instead of condemning them. We will acknowledge that the poor is not an identity group that lies on the margins of our society, but 1 in 2 Americans exploited and dispossessed by a system that prioritizes profit over human needs and dignity. We are also the leaders who, if organized to take action together, can become the new and unsettling force needed to transform this cruel and unjust society. The silos must end. We will shift the narrative and create a new truth, because what we may not have in material wealth, we more than make up for in tenacity. For we are also in the midst of a movement building upon what unites us, a greatest resurgence of a progressive collective. Our young people are no joke and mean business, and are letting us know that whether it is a lone shooter and a lone victim or 17 victims, gun violence must be addressed, and we must use our vote to address it. We can no longer be indifferent to the war economy. We must access a strategy by coming together, exchanging ideas, discovering new possibilities to figure out how, and welcome the diversity of those ideas with love and patience. Artists are the gatekeepers of truth. Paul Robeson said those words, and they are no less true today. We all know that art and culture is a powerful force for moving hearts and minds and policies toward equal opportunity. The arts are integral to and must be integrated into organizing and can shape public opinion. Art holds the key to reclaiming narrative and paving a moral course forward. Sankofa.org is the manifestation of my father's legacy, comprised of an incredible community and coalition of storytellers, activists, creators, and influencers. We are a social justice impact entertainment enterprise working in service of equitable change. We leverage artists, influencers, and creative content to shift mainstream narrative, to educate, motivate, and activate in service of grassroots movements. We shine a light. We must come together to utilize and increase the power of the arts as a core method to understanding and changing inequity. We must create spaces where collective action can emerge and expand diverse voices, organizations, and leaders to be a platform that affirms creativity as the cornerstone of liberation and well-being for us all. This is our moment. Let us work together. The forces of hate are hard at work, and we have a rare and urgent opportunity as forces of love and light to push our community into healing and awareness, to be the change we want to see reflected in the world. I believe in peace, in the power of righteousness. I believe in the morality of humanity. I believe in love. It is such a blessing to live a life animated by mission. There is no greater reward than to be of service to a higher cause. And if one day I am blessed with grandchildren and they ask me, what did you do? What did you do when unarmed people of color were being gunned down by police? What did you do when beautiful people were being threatened and labeled as enemies because of their religions or gender identity? What did you do? What did you do when people were being torn from their families and being deported? When our government lied and cheated us? What did you do when you let a narcissistic, pathological, hate-filled, racist, white supremacist become president? What did you do?